one thing I just wanted to add to that introduction about myself, besides having worked for Al-Maghrib Institute, I've been doing that for the past, I would say, 3 years, since 2005. But before that, I was a student like all of you in Purdue University, and I spent about 8 years over there working at various levels with the MSA. Started off as, typical volunteer, give me some work to do, I'll do this, I'll do that for you, just tell me what you want. And then eventually over time, I stayed there and I was doing research, and I started participating in other functions. I never actually took on a board member type of position, but I was involved with the leadership very often. And so I got to see firsthand how work was happening at the level of the MSA Executive Board in my own school. And I had a lot of input into the decision-making processes that happened there. So I do have a lot of experience, about 8 years of experience with MSA, and then another 3-4 years experience with Al-Maghrib Institute. And what I wanted to do is share some practical advice in order that, as the brother said earlier, that we want to go ahead and talk about establishing an Islamic trust with the community around us, with the Muslims and the non-Muslims, and how vitally important it is that we do that. So I want to start off by talking about a friend of mine from Purdue University. His name is Farouk. You guys don't know him, so it's okay, I can talk about him. And I'm only going to say good things about him anyway. So Farouk was a very, very interesting person. MashaAllah, he was a very good practicing brother. He's the type of brother who you'd say is a model of a practicing Muslim. And he was so funny, he would just to wake up for Fajr prayer, he would set 4 alarms. Not 4, like one alarm with 4 alarms going off. He had 4 separate alarms to wake him up. And he had one under his pillow, small one under his pillow. And he had one under his bed. He had one on the side. And then across from his bed, on his dresser, he had another one, because he was a very heavy sleeper. So each one would go off, 2 minutes, the first one would go off, he'd turn it off. Then the next, and then the next, and then the next. And sometimes some guys played a prank on him, and they switched up the order. So one of them would be going off, and then the others, he'd be trying to turn this one off. He's like, what's going on? You go crazy. I don't know why it's not turning off. Anyway, he was that kind of a guy. He was very, very dedicated to his salah, getting up and praying. And then in school, he was also a person who was achieving, doing really well. He was, I think he was getting an electrical engineering degree, and he was top of his class, or pretty close to top of the class. And then even as a member of his MSA, or of our MSA, I should say, he was a board member. He was participating very often in all the different activities that were going on. So he was active in that sense. And people knew him. He had a very good reputation in the community. You could say he was one of those people who had established that trust, where people had that good opinion of him. So one day, before he graduated, so 1 week before he graduated, one of his friends, another one of our friends, went to him and said, hey, there's this person I need to talk to. He's in the bars. There's a bar at our school called Where Else. I don't know where they came up with that name. But anyway, called Where Else. He's like, we need to go into Where Else. I just need to talk to this guy for 2 minutes, and then we'll just come right back. So Farouk said, okay, yeah, let's just go. Whatever, it's my last week here. Not a big deal, let's just go. And he walked into that bar. And when he walked in there, what did he come face to face with? He saw all these Muslims who were there, partying, drinking, chasing women, doing drugs, all sorts of things. Now, the thing is, it's not that we don't know who these brothers are. We didn't know who these brothers were. He knew who they were. But it's something else when you know that they're doing it, and another thing, we actually see them doing it. Okay, so that's kind of a shock. But even more important, or even more interesting, was their reaction when they saw him in there. Because sometimes when there's somebody who's really practicing and you look up to them, when you talk to them, you deal with them, there's certain things you just don't do or you don't say in front of them because you feel kind of modest. You feel kind of shy. You wouldn't say you wouldn't cuss in front of them, for example. You wouldn't swear in front of them. You wouldn't say certain things in front of them or talk about certain topics because you just feel shy about them or around them. So imagine now this guy who's supposed to be religious and so forth, he walks in there and everyone knows him. And they see him and they're all embarrassed and they're ashamed. And they just kind of timidly walk up to him and they're like, oh, Farouk, what are you doing here? And he's like, and he's a very innocent guy himself. He's very jovial. He's always smiling, and he didn't even care. He's just like, oh, I just walked in here to see what's going on. It's my last week here, haha, And he walked out. That was it. He just walked in, and walked out. Not judgmental at all. Didn't say anything about those brothers at all. But that embarrassment and that shame that they felt, all of a sudden turned to anger and sarcasm. Because what happened? Now they see that this guy walked in here, he took it lightly, and he was kind of joking around like, hey, I'm just here with you guys, it's my last week. And instead of being ashamed of what they did, they took that as an excuse to make themselves feel better about what they were doing. So they said, oh, look at this masjid hypocrite, you know, this disco molvi, here he is, showing this great face, and now he's coming in here with us and hanging out with us. I'll never forget, the next week, he came and he gave an amazing khutbah on the concept of predestination. Now understand that this khutbah had to be pretty amazing, because how many khutbahs can you remember? And that was like 6 years ago, and I still remember. I walked in late, and what I heard was just amazing. I'll never forget that. And after that khutbah, those brothers who, you know, they come to Friday prayer, and then after that they go out party at night, they got up and they started walking around and saying, hey, you know that khatib over there? I was partying with him at where else last week? We were hanging out, we were having a good time. They were putting him down. And even though Farooq was not really going there to really have a good time, you begin to see if somebody who is either a leader, somebody who's religious, somebody who has respect in the community, somebody who's taken as an example, if they are inconsistent in their behavior, and he was not meaning to do anything, but if they were inconsistent in their behavior, people take that as an excuse. They take that as an excuse to not become a practicing Muslim. Because then the next step after that is, well, you know, these people are such hypocrites, I don't want to be like them. They say one thing, and they do another thing. So, dear brothers and sisters in Islam, today I want to talk about building that trust, how we can establish that trust among people, how we can make sure that as leaders we are exemplifying the best example of Islam that we can, so that inshallah when people look at our da'wah, when they look at the way we are as leaders, they see the best of Islam. And I want to make a disclaimer here. I want to make a disclaimer. When we talk about establishing a trust, and we talk about putting forward the best example possible, naturally the first thought that pops in your head is that, oh, we're talking about making ourselves look good, we're talking about image control, so that we look good and we're putting ourselves up as practicing Muslims. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is putting forward the best example so that when people see you, they relate this back to Islam. They relate it back as a form of da'wah. They say, you know what, if this is what Muslims are like, I want to be like that. Whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim. They see that and say, that's what I want to be like. I want to be like this person, or I want to have that type of a practice. Second disclaimer, I don't want to get too theoretical. I don't want to talk like, there's a lot you can go into in this topic, and a lot of it can be very, very dense and theoretical and very, you know, do this and do that, or there's this hadith and there's this Quranic ayah, and go do something with it. I want to give you some practical advice that I've gained over the past, 10, 12 years working in da'wah. And so I'm just going to touch a few topics, and with half an hour you can't cover everything, but I'll try to cover, inshallah, just a few topics that I thought were really important, and things that I thought were, I wish I would have known when I had started out, inshallah. So the way I'm going to cover it is this. I'm going to talk about ways, first, you can take care of yourself. Okay, ways that you can take care of your own personal practice to help build on that Islamic trust. I'm also going to talk about how you interact with other people, inshallah. And then the last thing I will talk about is, as a leader working for the da'wah, or for, I guess, like the MSA, for example, how or what sort of traits and what sort of characteristics you should have in order that people will take you as somebody to trust, and they will themselves want to be more involved, and they themselves will say, hey, you know what, this is what Islam is all about, this is what I want to be a part of. So the first thing we'll talk about is yourself, okay? Now, let me ask all of you. You are the Muslim Student Association. You are representing Muslims on this campus. Let's open the floor up a little bit. What does it mean? What is the definition of a Muslim? Someone tell me. It's not a trick question. It's a very simple question. What is a Muslim? Does anyone know? You guys are all Muslim, right?